Hello everyone and welcome back to Alpenglow. This is part 2. So as you can see or hear, we're doing some voiceover this episode, and that's something I want to get back to. For the first episode, I didn't. I just had music, and the reason for that is that I was kind of rushing to get that episode out because I wanted it to at least be at the the very end of the very tail of the holiday season. Because I did want to have kind of like a Christmas episode or that kind of thing, whatever holiday you might celebrate. So I don't, there were some problems with it in terms of just the quality of the video. So I want to not have that issue this time. So I'm going to do voiceover, and there are fewer problems with the time lapse because I know last episode the time lapse got a little jumpy at some parts, and that's a problem I had with my recording setup, which is hopefully fixed now. I mean, you might see it every once in a while, but hopefully that should be all fixed for this series. So we're going to continue building this relatively big city. And yeah, I think I want to talk a little bit about what my plan for this series is. It's really, the idea for it is that I want to make something large. I want it to be about the expansion, the transit, the roads, the traffic management, that kind of thing, as opposed to the detailing that I usually do on my channel, which is, I enjoy both of them, and I think it's almost two different games in a way. You have the kind of game, the way it was meant to be played, building, a big city and trying to get as large of a city as you can. And then there's the detailed way where you kind of spend an hour or 10 hours making one little block, and I think they're both a lot of fun, and they're both very different, so I thought it would be cool to have a little bit of both on this channel, and so that's really the idea behind this series. So if you're not as much into that kind of expansion and traffic management and stuff, you're welcome to just completely skip this series and go watch Todos Santos, which is my detailed Puerto Rican city that I'm building, which we will get back to fairly soon. But first I have this, and now as you can see, there's that big line of traffic coming in from the top and on the bottom, and to fix that we basically make this giant roundabout, which in this game that's going to solve all your traffic problems, is giant roundabouts. There's no reason not to do them really if you don't care about looks, because obviously they're not the most beautiful thing when they're not detailed, and this one is not very detailed, but it works really well once we get it all going. So we have these the 6-lane road that was there that I just changed to a 4-lane road. There's pretty much everyone is turning left or going straight there. And so when you have just like an intersection meeting there, that doesn't really work that well. A stoplight intersection works better when the traffic is pretty evenly spread out, and it can't really handle it that well when everyone's going in the same direction. So for example, if everyone's turning left, it's generally a lot better to have a roundabout like this, and so that's why I decided to do that here. And then I'm making a lot of adjustments here with traffic president or traffic manager, and I do that just because there are a lot of pedestrian crossings that are created when you do something like this, and I'm trying to keep this series as vanilla as possible, but there are some things that I just can't take in the vanilla game, so I am forbidding pedestrians to cross, like through the roundabout, for example. That just is not something that works very well. And now we're moving over to the other side of the city, and we have this highway, and I wanted to do basically a ring road that goes around the north side of the city, kind of running along at the base of the mountains, which I think is kind of a nice solution because it's not too disruptive to the city. If this were a real city, the highway would probably just be right through the middle and they'd have to bulldoze a bunch of houses or whatever. This kind of runs, it does cut off some of the city from the mountains, which is not too great, but I think it's fine. I'm not too worried about it. But basically we needed a way for people to get into the city that wasn't funneled through that main diverging diamond intersection that we built in the first episode, which was basically completely full and it was terrible. Everyone was using that one interchange to get into all parts of the city. So my thinking with this was that that would kind of alleviate that and just give another way to spread the the trips out throughout the city. But to do that, we of course have to have a fairly large interchange. So that's what I'm doing here. We have that fly under ramp, I guess you could call it, that goes through a tunnel underneath the actual intersection of the two roads. And that'll serve anyone who's coming to the, from left to right, as we were just looking. Yeah, left to right here. And that'll allow them to come into the city. Not a lot of people actually end up using it, but it's there if they want to. Then we're bringing that up here. And we'll do, it's kind of like a modified parklow. I seem to like that term because I did that. I did one of those in Todos Santos that was pretty cool. If you want to go check that out, be sure to do that. It's a pretty cool episode. You might like it. And I decided to have the main ring road itself here kind of it goes over the highway and then it goes way down underneath this, just that arterial road there. Which is, probably not how it would happen in real life. They wouldn't want to spend the money to go over and then spend the money to dig under. They'd probably just stick with one of them. But I think it's something that looks kind of cool, and that's just something I wanted to do. Again, I'm not worried about being super realistic with this. I'm not so much going for the, the realistic details. I want something that looks realistic from above, fairly realistic from above, but mostly I'm worried about function. And I think this does end up functioning quite nicely. It's probably a little too big as far as the number of people that actually use it, but that's okay. And so now we have a cloverleaf ramp here, and that kind of makes it a modified parklow interchange, I guess. We have some kind of an alternative option for people turning left off of the ring road that we'll see later. Yep, we're starting it right here. So I figured that not many vehicles would be using this ring road to turn left coming from either direction. So what I have is just a left turn lane that crosses over the other side. Because I'm imagining this isn't like built to like in the US, like interstate standards. It's fine for them to cross over opposing traffic as long as they're careful about it. And that's kind of inspired by some roads I've driven on around like Calgary and Edmonton and that kind of area. Well, really all throughout Alberta. There are a few highways that are kind of like that, and there are a few turns that are like that. And I just think that's something that's kind of cool, and I wanted to try to replicate here. Then another thing I can't stand in the vanilla game is the merging rules that they give. People can merge onto the highway and go directly across 3 lanes. I think that's just terrible. So I did adjust the lane assignments with Traffic Manager. I think that's probably, if you had to pick one mod, either that or Move It, I think you should probably get one of those 2 mods, because it's an easy way to solve a lot of problems that the vanilla game has. Even though I do think the vanilla game is a lot of fun. And then, so I wanted to do, throughout the city, I kind of have this thing where the on-ramps and off-ramps are 2 lanes for a lot of them. And that's something you see in real life is even on-ramps, you'll have, the people that are turning right onto the on-ramp will go into one lane, and people that are turning left onto it from the opposite direction will go into the other lane. And then they basically have to kind of figure it out themselves how they're going to all merge together. But it just helps to eliminate points of contact so that they can at least get through the intersection safely and then, battle their way onto the freeway. But that's something that the vanilla game doesn't really lend itself to, but it's something that I try to replicate. And then we have this kind of weird, that looks terrible. But eventually, yeah, I think I deleted this like 3 or 4 times. I don't know if I included all of them in the time lapse, but you can see me struggle trying to make this on-ramp. And that's another one where people who are coming from now from the right on the way we're looking at it, they would just have to turn across opposing traffic to get onto the freeway. But really not a lot of people end up using it. I'm actually done building the city, so I can say that. So yeah, I think it turned out pretty nicely, and I didn't have to. It was really hard to fit more like cloverleaf or well, it was harder to fit cloverleaf ramps in here, and I didn't want to have it to be basically like a big stack interchange. I just don't want this to be that kind of city. So yeah, that's kind of why I went with this solution that you're going to see me successfully create now. Finally. All right, so I'm just adjusting this ramp here, and then I think in a second we're going to go over, and you can see, yeah, these roads that I'm dragging out here, I wanted to have a little bit of like a frontage road system along this area because it's not as dense as the downtown. So they, you know, they have this space to allow the traffic to flow a little bit more freely. So we have this frontage road system that cars can exit onto, and then they can eventually get to their you know, their main arterial, or get back onto the freeway, or go onto the ring road or whatever. And that just allows them to kind of, it allows the through traffic to stay on the freeway, and the traffic that is going into the city to exit and kind of be on its own little system. And so that's something I wanted to try. It's not really something I've done in the game before. So I have that there. I don't actually show me building the whole thing on camera, but it's pretty simple. It's just 2-lane, one-way roads on each side of the freeway. And it works pretty nicely. And, you know, if you have the space in your city, that's something you might want to consider. Or you could do like a collector express kind of style where, you know, the through traffic does stay in the center of the road. And then cars that are exiting will go onto the, I believe that would be the collector lanes. They basically exit out into those, and then they then go on to exit to their, you know, whatever exit they're taking. And that's kind of like a higher speed, more land use heavy version of what I've done here. But I think this is fine for this purpose. This isn't, I'm not intending for this to be a huge city. I think we end up with like somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 citizens according to the game mechanics. I don't know what that would actually entail as far as how, you know, this type of infrastructure and everything. So that's the end of this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, and we're going to be doing a lot more expansion in the next episode, so be sure to check in on that one, hopefully next week or maybe even earlier. So thank you so much for watching. I will catch you later on Alpenglow.